unbiased. I would like to put a question, if I may, to Councillor Wells, and it is in regard not specifically to the report, but to process to which this report has led, or actually upon which it has been based, to be correct. May I remind you, Councillor Wells, that we had a briefing meeting from you when I and my colleagues were still part of the UKIP group. It was a UKIP meeting, and it was held on the evening of the 13th of August, when you gave us a briefing of the current position on RiverOak and the CPO. Several of us came away from that meeting with more questions than answers, and we made it our business to try to find out more about the CPO. I won't go into that now, but it is on record that we held a meeting separately with Ramsgate Town Council, for which I was personally threatened with personal ruin. And I think I would like to put that in within this chamber. We came away from that meeting on the 13th of August with many questions unanswered, and we wanted to find out what we could. We then, through certain events that took place, had a private meeting with Councillor Wells in his office here, which was attended by the Deputy Leader and also a member of KCC and a UKIP party member, who, after he had heard the meeting that took place, gave us a lovely greeting as we left, which was, "You have now signed your own death warrant."
Oh, shame! Shame on you! Shame!
Just one moment. Can we? Yeah, hang on a second. We are getting to a question, are we? Because I'm just saying, because I don't want to artificially limit anybody else from talking, because the first one or two speakers take up too much time. So can you just bear that in mind?
Thank you. Thank you. Within that meeting, we were able to ask questions, myself and my three colleagues who are here. My question was very simple, not very long, but I really wanted to know. I wanted to know why we had had so many delays. This was now August, and we had stood on a very serious ticket all the way through the election campaign. Manston was the priority. It was our main manifesto today. We had laws pledging that if you want to save Manston, you must vote UKIP. And we took that seriously. So I was concerned between May, when this council voted for an aid at the AGM for a CPO, and August, what had happened. And we didn't seem to have any real information at all. So my question was this, very briefly. I said to Councillor Wells in that meeting in his office, "Please, Chris, can you tell me? I am really concerned about these delays. Is there another agenda with Manston? Are the officers nervous? That would be understandable if they were. Or has there been a government edict to build 10,000 houses on Manston, which is for a London overspill? Or has there been a new plump investor who has come along who is very hard to resist? Please will you tell me what is really going on?" And Councillor Wells sat there and stared at me, and he did not answer me. And so I would like to ask now, if I may, because those questions are still relevant today and to what we're doing here now. May I ask you, please, Councillor Wells, why you didn't answer me on that meeting, at that meeting, on that question?
Certainly, it's pretty simple. There were 4 of you in my office at the time. The complaint was that you hadn't been listened to. I made it quite clear that the best way for this meeting to be conducted was that I would sit and listen to each of your questions in turn, which I duly did. That process took an hour and a quarter, and I took notes and asked no questions or any comments during that period of the hour and a quarter while the 4 of you spoke, in order except for clarification. When the moment came for me to answer those questions, I didn't get further than 3 or 4 sentences in before I was shouted down by the 4 of you together, and after 10 minutes of not being able to speak, I asked you all to leave.
Rubbish.
Councillor Gregory, Kay, please.
Rubbish.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep it brief, and I don't intend to ask a specific question, but more to make a comment. As one of the 3 ward councillors, it's something that I'm gratified that the entire council seems really interested in our ward for the first time ever, I think, in the 20 years I've been on the council. What I'd like to say is, when I joined this council 20 odd years ago now, nearly 21 years ago, one of the things that the then leader told me was you should take risks, because if you don't take risks you go nowhere. If you take occasional risk you go forward, and to my mind that is still relevant today, because we do have to take risks, and if we don't, then we might just as well all go home and just tick a box once a week to see how we vote on things, and that's not what it's all about. Secondly, during the course of the recent election back in May, one of the things that I was reminded of was do not promise things you can't deliver. Because and it will bite you. And I'm afraid this one has. Now our group has been always fully committed to exploring ways to bring a CPO, bring the airport back into use. Because quite honestly, ever since it's shut, that is the sole focus, if you like, of many of the people of Thanet. And what I would say to you is, please, I've looked at the motion that's been moved, I've looked at the number of the Cabinet that are obviously going to support it, and the number that haven't yet voted, and I think quite honestly, all our conversations, because Cabinet members should have read the papers, and quite honestly they will have made their minds up, and I don't blame them for that, that's part of the job. But what I would say to you is, look to the future and don't promise the electorate stuff you do not have the power to deliver or the will to deliver.
Thank you, Councillor Gregory. In the area of taking risks, I find it interesting that risk-taking is something that members of this council currently have an appetite for. Having got elected in May and elected with a legacy of now certainly £3 million that had to be paid in compensation to live animal exports. Prior to that, £3.4 million lost on taking a risk on Trans-Europa ferries.
Labour group.
Well, actually, that's not quite true, but never mind.
It wasn't a risk, it was bad management.
The payment for the East Kent Spine Road, which was the subject of a really quite serious and quite bitter debate in this room, some 18 months ago, which still hadn't been paid when we arrived. Another 2.9 million, and then there's a place called Pleasurama, where, over 12 years, and to give Councillor Mrs Johnston her due, she brought a 12-year misery to a sort of conclusion in that area. But these are all prime examples where I suspect, Councillor Gregory, councillors have put a little bit of risk ahead of a little bit of common sense.
There is no risk with bad management.
There is no risk with the river.
You swap sides.
The amount of money that we may have to put on risk if we get this wrong dwarfs all of those sums added together by at least 2, if not 3. And if I say the appetite for risk is not what it was in those years when money was easier, I'll probably be saying nothing other than common sense. And can I draw your attention to the very first barrister's report under Councillor Johnston's administration, written by Guy Williams, which started with the sentence, "Local authorities cannot take a leap of faith." I think I'm quoting that correctly. And as such, we have to be extraordinarily cautious about the risks that we take in a financial environment which is only going to get worse. In terms of promising the electorate what we couldn't deliver, I met with Mr. Freudman during the election campaign and listened to what he felt was wrong with the original decision. I explained in my introduction that actually one of the things we felt had gone wrong with the decision was the 25-year horizon, which we removed from the negotiation. And having taken some legal advice even then through the party's lawyers, we felt that we could actually move this thing forward in a different way than had been tried before. And we not only got the abandonment of 25 million, but I think Councillor Johnson will agree that one of her mantras during the previous year was she'd like some money in a UK bank account, and we at least got some of that. So we did move it forward, and we have made very real efforts in order to ensure that the balance of that election promise against the balance of the risk we may be asked to take with taxpayers' money was correct and proper. Councillor Piper, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've read the report presented to this meeting, and as an ordinary man of the street, most of it makes sense to me. The report says RiverOak have not met the criteria. Incidentally, as you mentioned, the same conclusion that was made by the Cabinet on the previous administration. However, during the last week or so, I've also received a number of direct communications from RiverOak personnel. And having read those communications, I have to admit that as an ordinary man of the street, most of it makes sense to me. And here is the rub. We appear to have two conflicting reports that could both make sense to the ordinary man or woman in the street, particularly given our limited access to information. On the one hand, there is a report here which says the financial requirements have not been met. And on the other hand, we have documents from RiverOak that say they have the financial backing and will continue to provide monies as the process requires them. I know it is a bit more complicated than that, but it seems to me and the people I meet around the town to be what lies at the heart of the matter. The report, Introduction and Background 1.3 brackets D, says any indemnity partner needs to demonstrate the resources to acquire by private treaty well before the stage of seeking a CPO. It would be helpful, please, if we could have a definition of demonstrate as used in that context, because the report says they haven't, they say they have. You've already touched on the fact that we have no money and given some explanation about whether we are minimising risk or eliminating risk. The report, timeline 3.29, says with respect to the need to acquire the land within a set period after the confirmation of a CPO, RiverOak said they would need time after the confirmation of the CPO to secure and document the funding for the project. Given that the CPO process might take up to 2 years before the CPO is confirmed by the Secretary of State, RiverOak could then take up to 3 years to obtain the funding. This could see the airport lying dormant for potentially 5 years if there is no obligation on RiverOak to secure its funding within a set period of the confirmation. It's clear from the report here tonight that the CPO process could take 2 years. What is not clear is the automatic addition of the other 3 years. If the next stage could take 3 years, meaning 2 + 3 = 5, would the issue of a potential 5-year process be in the best interests of the people of Thanet, and what are the alternatives? Have RiverOak given any indication of not needing the full 3 years? My man on the street heart says now, today, go for the CPO.
Yes! Yes! Well done, Reverend Piper!
Sadly for me, my heart cannot determine the actions of this Cabinet or Council. Clearly for this project we've needed expert legal advice. The problem seems to be that the expert legal minds cannot agree the details. And if there's any truth in that, how on earth can the ordinary man or woman in the street make any sense of the argument? The proposed indemnity partner either has demonstrated their funding capability or they haven't.
Yes.
A genuine request, please do not leave us all thinking that the future of Manston Airport, and through the airport, the future of Thanet as a whole, is down to a legal squabble about words. And you say tomato, I say tomato. If it is, the people, a war of words, the people of Thanet will have been done a great disservice. This report is not really the kind of language that the public were looking for. The public were looking for clarity one way or another. Please, can that legal advice be clearly and succinctly stated for all of us? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well done.
In answer to the first part of your question about acquiring the land before CPO or whatever, paragraph 24 of the government circular 062